Thank you for joining me. I kind of got this idea yesterday when I was outside in the heat here watering my hydrangeas, thinking that I should probably just start cutting them and bringing them inside to enjoy. And as I started doing that, I started thinking about doing an indoor flower show. And I don't know how many of you have ever been to a flower show. So I'm going to start by talking about those first. So again, this idea just came to me yesterday as I was watering and starting to cut some hydrangeas because in the heat, and we've had a lot of days where the heat has been really high, and so they're starting to look kind of droopy in the middle of the day. So rather than run around and try to keep them hydrated and looking beautiful, I decided to cut them. I'm really not a cut flower person, and I really don't do floral arranging, so you'll have to overlook that. So I thought I'd talk about some tips on cutting the hydrangeas and a little bit about the colors of the hydrangeas, and then about the different species and the different flower forms, because sometimes people get confused because they think one flower form means it's a certain species, but it might be a different one. Okay, so we're going to start with colors. So if I come around over here, and I'm going to start by talking about the different colors of hydrangeas. And really, they're only bred to be blue, white, or pink. And actually I want to back up a bit because I do want to give you some tips on cutting the hydrangeas. I'm particularly talking about cutting these round, what are called mophead hydrangeas. They typically tend to be the Hydrangea Macrophylla hydrangeas or macrophylla hydrangeas. When you're cutting them, you really want to wait until you start to see some maturity on the flowers. So when they first come out, they're really fresh looking and kind of soft looking, and then over time they'll start to age a little bit, and they'll start to be what we call kind of papery feeling. And that's how you know when it's a good time to start cutting your hydrangeas if you want to bring them in. Coincidentally, it's also a good time to prune this kind of hydrangea. And a lot of people get confused about pruning hydrangeas, and I'll talk about that more later. So it's a good opportunity right now to both bring them inside to enjoy them. Enjoy them as cut flowers. It's a good time to cut them now, and it's a good time to prune them. So when you do cut them, a couple of things. Cut them and think about pruning at the same time. So you want to cut them all the way down to about 3 to 4 inches from the ground. You don't need to bring that entire stem in. That's just for the shrub or the hydrangea itself, which is a better pruning technique. Then you'll cut it off so that you only have the green part here. So there'll be a section of stem that's woody, then there'll be the green section of the hydrangea stem. So cut just below that. The other thing to do is to cut early in the morning. They tend to be fresher, more hydrated in the morning. And it's good to cut them after you've watered them or they've had some rain. I get a 3-gallon bucket of water, and I do this in a shady, cool location. And I will take the flowers, and I will actually take the flower head, hold it down in the water, in the bucket of water for a few seconds, and that does a couple of things. It can help hydrate and refresh and cool off the flower. But more importantly than that, it also causes an evacuation of insects. So anything that might be in there, spiders, ants, little bees, anything is going to come out. And then I take them out, and then I put them back down in that bucket of water and kind of push them down into the water, and I leave them for a few minutes so that they rehydrate really well that way. And again, I'm wanting to make sure I get any insects that might be in there evacuating out of the flowers before I bring them in. So then I'll bring them out of the bucket and bring them inside where it's cooler, and then that's when I really will clean them up and trim them up some more and put them in the containers. So cut them early, make sure they're hydrated, And that's how you want to cut them when you're bringing them in. The colors, I get a lot of questions about colors of hydrangeas, and as I begin to say, they're blue, or they're white, or they're pink. And then you'll often see them referred to in different hues, like they might have hues of green or red or things like that. But really what they're talking about is, what is the hydrangea genetically bred to be in a near neutral soil? Is it blue, is it pink, or is it white? And the white hydrangeas, I will tell you, in the Hydrangea Macrophyllas and in the other hydrangeas, are only ever going to be white. You're not going to change the color. You're not going to change a white to a pink or a white to a blue. However, the other part about colors of hydrangeas that's interesting is they have this long bloom period, and the hydrangeas will change colors over that period of bloom. So they might come out one color, and then they will peak and be another color, and then they will mature to another shade. So white ones sometimes will come out green, and sometimes they will mature to a pink or a red, referred to as a red. So I'm not saying you won't ever see a white hydrangea, especially in your oak leaf hydrangeas or your paniculata hydrangeas, that doesn't mature to a pretty shade of pink or red, but when they come out and flush in that peak bloom, they're going to be white. You can't change them to pink or blue. So the question about changing the colors, I don't really try to change the colors of mine with the soil. It's a factor of the genetics of the plant. It's also a factor of your soil pH. Is it acidic or is it alkaline? And it's also a factor of the nutrients in your soil. So your blue hydrangeas, if you want a blue, do a little bit of research and see which ones tend to be described as being the best blues or are going to be blue in a neutral soil, and the same thing for the pinks. Which ones are going to be pink in a neutral soil? And do a little Google image searching to see, when you look at the results, is it vastly pink or is it vastly blue when you see the results for that? The blues, if you have one and you're trying to change it, or you say, look, I live in acidic soil but I want a pink, I would say get one that is bred to be pink and put it in a container. And a lot of hydrangeas now are compact in size where you can keep them in containers. In general, when you keep hydrangeas in containers, they will stay true to being pink if they're bred to be pink. And it's easier to have one that maybe it is a blue to take it to a pink like that. Because your container mixes tend to be alkaline, your water tends to be alkaline. So they tend to want to be pink in containers if you live in acidic soil. The purples, a lot of people ask me about how do you get shades of purple. And then I'm going to come down here and show you, because I was just updating a lot of mine on Plants Map, and it was interesting to see how some of them I bought were pink and then they went to purple and then blue. So it's really what's happening is a pink hydrangea that is in neutral to acidic soil starting to change color, or it's a blue hydrangea in neutral soil starting to change color. So if it's a blue in alkaline soil, it's starting to change to the pink, right? So it's a blue going to a pink or a pink going to a blue, then that's when you start to get those purple hues. And some hydrangeas will do that more than others, will have a purple hue to them, and I'm going to show you some. So the one in the center here is, I've already shared this one, this is Blue Danube. So a hint is if the name includes blue, it's bred to be a blue. So Nico Blue is a very popular one. But I have seen blue Nico Blues in alkaline soil. But this is Blue Danube. It is my richest, deepest blue. I do have slightly acidic soil. So my soil is only around 6.8 or 6.5. That's pretty much near neutral, which is 7. So I don't have strongly acidic soil. So what you're seeing here is just slightly acidic soil. Also, the nutrients that they're taking up in acidic soil is aluminum. So that's really what is delivering the blue, is the nutrient uptake there of aluminum, okay? So this is Blue Danube. It's one of my most reliable bloomers. It is a Hydrangea Macrophylla, and I'll talk about the species in a little bit. This is another Hydrangea Macrophylla. It's a little bit lighter blue. This is another really reliable bloomer for me. It is Matilda Gutches is the name. Both of these will bloom on old wood, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. This is another one called a Hydrangea Macrophylla called All Summer Beauty. And you can see that has even a lighter blue, but this one I bought, it was pink. And you'll see it has some shades of purple in there and blue now. This one will bloom on old wood and new wood, and was actually a precursor before Endless Summer. This was the one that first became known to have that reliable characteristic of blooming on new wood and old wood in the Hydrangea Macrophyllas. It's not as cold hardy. So Endless Summer is more cold hardy, and that's why Endless Summer really took off, was because it had an extra zone hardiness than this one, and was a very reliable bloomer because it bloomed on old and new wood. This one is called Brestenberg, and this one also gives me a lot of purples. This one started out pink, and so now I'm getting a lot of shades of purple and blue in my slightly acidic soil. Another tip that I have for you in buying hydrangeas, the newer ones, the Hydrangea Macrophyllas, tend to be have more of the characteristics of what they call reblooming, or the ability to bloom on old and new wood. But a lot of the older hydrangeas, especially the ones if you find have French names or German names, they tend to be bred in France, Germany, Switzerland. They are really reliable bloomers. A thing to know about the hardiness of them is if you buy a zone colder than your zone, then they'll tend to bloom a little bit better. Because with Hydrangea Macrophyllas, they're really talking about the root hardiness of that plant. They're not talking about the stem or the flower bud hardiness. So go a zone colder, and you'll be more likely to get those blooms to stay on them. Coming over to the pinks, this one is called Pink Sensation. And again, I have slightly acidic soil. Don't know how long this one will stay pink, but it is staying. It's bloomed 2 years for me, that color, as Pink Sensation. This is a white one. Again, the whites won't really change. This is called Merit White. I think it was actually a sport off of Merit Supreme. This is one called Peewee, and these are all Hydrangea Macrophyllas so far that I'm showing you. This is called Peewee, and this is actually a dwarf one. And this one is a pink, and it is kind of starting to change to a blue for me, but it's going through this really pretty purpley pink color for me this year. And it's loaded with blooms. And again, this is a dwarf compact one that only gets about 2 to 3 feet tall. This is neat because this is a double flower one called Double Delights Perfection. And so the flowers are actually doubles. And so I want you to look real close at this Peewee again. What you're actually looking at right here in the center, that's the flower. So a lot of these, what are called mopheads of the Hydrangea Macrophyllas, were cultivated years and years and years. The French really were the first to start really selecting them for this look. So that's why a lot of times they're called French hydrangeas. It's because they really went and took the round flowers of this species and really started selecting them for what became known as mopheads, okay? But the flowers are the teeny tiny centers in there, okay? And the outsides are really more sepals, so that's where the flowers are on the hydrangeas. This is a double. This one is an interesting one called Galileo. You won't really find this one in garden centers. Interesting, look at the flower in there. The teeny tiny flower in the center of the, actually they call these ray flowers or florets. And then that's the actual true flower they're opening in the center. This one is Galileo. It's Hydrangea Macrophylla. I left the foliage here so you can see macro, big, phyla, leaf. Big leaf hydrangea. So these go by a lot of common names, and that kind of confuses people, right? So big leaf hydrangea, French hydrangea, mophead hydrangea. You're talking about the same hydrangea really here. Galileo is known as a florist hydrangea. I was told, I learned this at a trade show, and they actually gave me this hydrangea at the end of the trade show. They were a florist breeding hydrangea company, and they breed for size of the flower and color of the flower. So when people order from them, they're ordering the color and they're ordering the size of the flower. Galileo is their best flower in terms of being able to change the color to exactly the color that their client wants. So that's a very interesting hydrangea if you can find it. Unfortunately, a lot of times your florist hydrangeas are not tagged and you don't know what you have. I encourage you to try to plant them anyway. They're not necessarily bred for hardiness. Again, the florist hydrangeas are really bred more for how easy it is to change the color of the flower. So the flower heads and the leaves lead me to the next thing I want to talk about, because people get confused about hydrangeas and pruning because we say, well, it depends on the species and all that kind of thing. So far, everything that you've seen has been a Hydrangea Macrophylla. And the common names, again, are big leaf, French, mophead, referring to the round flowers. So in terms of the foliage, you really need to look at the foliage as well as the flowers to determine what species of hydrangea do you have, and that also sometimes determines on when you're going to prune it. Like I said, with these, the convenient thing with the Hydrangea Macrophyllas is that when they're beautiful, when they're in their glory, is when you want to prune them, typically, because they have always been mostly old wood blooming, but now you have newer ones like this Double Delights and the All Summer Beauty, which will bloom on new wood too. But, so the timing is kind of that, is what confuses people. And they also have a really long bloom period because they hold those blooms for a long time. So you can't say, well, when they're done flowering, because they still look beautiful into the end of July. So you really want to, and I live in Virginia Zone 7, so you might need to make a little adjustments about this, but you really want to prune them. You know, a rule of thumb with these and the Hydrangea corsifolias is beginning July 4th to the end of July, and then that gives them time to put on new growth this year, which will be your old wood next year, which is where your flowers are going to come from. So the flower types, the round ones are really just round and flat, which have become known as lace caps, or the conical or the paniculatas. Okay, so colors, you're really only going to have blue, white, pink. Shape, you're going to have round, flat, or lace cap, or the conical. And then you get into the foliage. And so knowing the flower shape and the foliage helps you determine what you have. The one that I'm looking at here is another Hydrangea Macrophylla, double flower form, and the big leaf. But if you look at this one, it's also round. And this is Hydrangea Arborescens. And this one will start out, it's called Limeta. It will start out lime green. It will go to really white, and then it will fade to lime green again. This is another Hydrangea Arborescens, which is a round one. And this one is the Invincible, the pink one, Ruby. I think Invincible Ruby is the name. And it will start out vibrant pink, then it will kind of fade. And it will fade to kind of a light green, and then now it's fading to even more of a dark, kind of a mauve color, which I really like. But foliage is different on that. So the Arborescens is a native hydrangea, but it has really thin foliage, okay? And it tends to be smaller, a little bit smaller, and a little bit more, I don't know, some call it heart-shaped than the big leaf. There are also lace cap, which I'll show you at the end, in both of these, lace cap flower forms. But the next drastic change from the round is the cone-shaped ones, or the ones that are called paniculatas, or oak leaf. And actually, this is where people start to get confused. The three flower forms are round, flat, or lace cap, or cone or paniculata shaped. Hydrangea paniculata is the one here. Hydrangea quercifolia is also cone shaped, all right? The difference again comes down to the foliage. This is a native one, and it has very different, what looks like oak leaf foliage. So that is Hydrangea quercifolia. It has the panicle cone shaped flowers. These tend to be white, and then they mature. Sometimes they will come out kind of a lime green, but they mostly are white. A lot of these will mature to shades of pink or red. So you'll have some that are named like ruby slippers. It will come out white, and there's I think another popular one called strawberry something or other. And then it'll turn this flush of pink right away, or it'll mature to a reddish hue. So that's Hydrangea quercifolia. This particular one is Peewee, and it is just a smaller habit of the species. And again, if you look at these, the flowers are the teeny tiny, and these have already been pollinated. These are the teeny tiny flowers inside. These are the more showy ray flowers. This one looks similar, but the foliage is much different. So you can see paniculatas. This is actually an Asian hydrangea. So, but it has the same cone-shaped flowers, right? Most of these are going to be white again, but they might start out green, or they might mature to a red. And then the one here at the end is actually my favorite, and these are the lace cap flower types. This one is a Hydrangea Macrophylla, big leaf, right? See the big leaf? Hydrangea. So it's the same species as these with the round big mopheads, but it has this different flower type of a lace cap. This one is called wedding gown, and it comes out white. It'll get a little bit of green on it, and then this will actually mature to a really pretty dark red when it starts to dry. So that's a lace cap Hydrangea Macrophylla. Then the other three here are actually my favorite hydrangeas, which I've said before, Hydrangea Serratus. They tend to be mostly lace caps. You can find some with the round flower heads. This one is Hydrangea Aha, Hydrangea Serrata Aha. And it's actually has a double flower here. The true flowers are here in the center, and then it's a reblooming one. And there are some hydrangeas with variegated foliage. This is another Serrata. Serrata for the serrated foliage there. And this is one of my favorite Serratas, also Hydrangea Serrata Bluebird. The Serratas don't lend themselves to being cut flowers as much as the round flower types and the mophead types. So that is my hydrangea tour. I have a couple of odd ones here at the end. This is a mystery hydrangea I won at a Conifer Society auction, and I don't really know the species because the person that put it in the auction, who was a plant collector, didn't know the species. So it's a seedling of a species, and it's getting ready to bloom this year for the first time. And then another one that you can get, which is unusual, is my latest blooming one. This is called Hydrangea Involucrata Blue Bunny. And it will get a really big bud, and then it will burst into bloom in August. This one will always be blue, and it's a lace cap type flower. So that's my little hydrangea flower show. Again, if you have an opportunity to go to a flower show, a lot of garden clubs will host flower shows. The fairs usually have flower shows, and the plant societies will host flower shows depending on when their peak bloom is for theirs. This year, I know the Iris Society did a virtual flower show online. Coming up would normally be coming into dahlia season, and they would have a dahlia flower show, so you might be able to see one of those virtually online this year. Chrysanthemums are another popular flower show, so you might look for those online. But hopefully at some point in time you'll get to go to a flower show. And the really cool part is what you've just seen here. When you go to a flower show, it actually looks like this. And they will just line up the flowers, put them together into either categories or classes or divisions or genus, depending on which one you go to. And you get to compare and look at them side by side by side and learn, really, you don't realize how different they are until you see them side by side. So I hope you learned a little bit about hydrangeas. If you have any questions, I'll post this video and you can ask me some more questions. I can give you some more links for more information. But I would say go out and cut some of your hydrangeas and bring them in and enjoy them right now.